Iceberg Tech loves console equivalents, so the Asrock BC-250 should be right up my street. After all, it's a PS5 APU for $100, at least according to the headlines. The problem is, it's not a PS5 APU, it's 2/3 of a GPU and 3/4 of a CPU, and it's not even $100 anymore. Does that change the equation? If you need your PC for work, or you chose your laptop for its thinness and lightness, chances are you don't have enough ports, or the ones you do have are stuck somewhere out of reach. The Maxidok from UGREEN is a one-stop desktop solution to your own personal I/O shortage, giving you easy access to the connectivity you need without sacrificing performance. This 10-in-1 mains-powered dock turns a single Thunderbolt 5 port into 3 Type-A USB ports for legacy devices, 2 Type-C Thunderbolt ports for external monitors and other data-heavy applications, a display port capable of feeding an 8K monitor, Gigabit Ethernet for reliable network connectivity, and, my favourite part, high-speed SD and microSD slots for you demanding photographers and videographers out there. The Maxidok provides up to 100 watts of power over the supplied Thunderbolt cable, so you can charge your laptop or mini PC and power your dock from a single plug. Most importantly, it looks pretty good too, with minimalist industrial design, robust metal construction, and rubber feet to stop it sliding about all over your desk. Check out the Maxidok 10-in-1 from UGREEN, as well as the flagship 17-in-1 that adds even more ports, 240 watts of power delivery and an M.2 slot, and the rest of the Revo dock range at the link below. The BC-250 came about during the crypto craze of the early 20s, sold in clusters that could slot into a server rack and print digital funny money all day long. After the crypto gravy train was derailed, mining outfits sold off their BC-250s through outlets like eBay and AliExpress, but due to the complete lack of utility for anything other than crypto mining, they were selling cheap. I bought mine on Singles Day 2025 for about £65, which was probably the last time they were available for under 100 USD. You can blame us YouTubers for the price hike if you want to. After all, my colleagues did get very excited about them at the tail end of last year, but the price increase was sort of inevitable. The hardware might be intimidating to the average user, but to tinkerers, the BC-250 is pretty enticing. 2/3 of a PS5 is still better than most integrated GPUs and even older graphics cards. And while 16GB of unified RAM isn't a lot in the context of modern PC gaming, even 16GB of old DDR4 these days costs about as much as this whole board. The reason it was ever cheap at all was simply because it couldn't do anything. That was rectified thanks to the efforts of the Linux community, and as of last year, you can now install a distro like Bazzite on a BC-250 and have full driver support. Custom BIOSes allow for allocation of VRAM beyond a simple 8/8 split, and governor software allows for overclocking. The BC-250 has gone from e-waste, barely worth the $100 asking price, to a viable low-spec gaming machine. Turning the BC-250 into a tidy, robust, protected unit takes some level of cost and effort. There's no active cooling system, just a single 4-pin header and a heatsink that's designed for server fans. There's no Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, and only limited USB ports to plug stuff like that into, and the one Gen 2 M.2 slot will be occupied by an SSD. Despite looking kinda like a graphics card, the BC-250 doesn't slot into any case or eGPU housing I own, so the only real solutions are custom 3D printed housings. I skipped the niceties and just gaffer taped a laptop fan to the front, sealed off a lot of air gaps, and propped the whole thing up on some plastic CPU cooler standoffs, but there are some very cool mod projects out there for people who want to make their BC-250 look more polished and professional. Before I get into the benchmarks, I ran a few preliminary tests to see what works and what doesn't. The overlay is bugged, showing GPU usage stuck at 665%, so it's going to be hard to tell a CPU bottleneck from a GPU bottleneck. At stock clocks, temps seem very reasonable. The fan is on automatic and is far from maximum capacity, so there should be some room for overclocking. Based on these early experiences, I guess I probably shouldn't get my hopes up for the BC-250 as a high-end gaming rig. However, perhaps tweaking the clocks will make things a bit more usable. The old lamer is YouTube's resident BC-250 tweaking expert, so I referred to his videos when it came to swapping the BIOS and dialing in some higher CPU and GPU frequencies. To test out the overclock, I ran a quick before and after in The Last of Us Part 2, which at stock settings averages 51 FPS. Overclocking the CPU to 3.85 GHz from 3.5 and the GPU to over 2 GHz from a fixed 1.5 increases performance from 51 to 53.2. Oh, and also increases temps by around 20 degrees and causes my laptop fan to make a noise like an Airbus on takeoff. Hitting a 60 average is almost possible in this game, simply by swapping FSR anti-aliasing for the regular temporal variety, but as with other tests I found, the frame times weren't great. Which is a shame, because my experience of this game's performance is usually pretty positive. If you are partial to higher settings, and don't mind upscaling, the high preset with quality FSR manages a respectable 56 FPS. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is an infamous PS5 port, and I guess it shouldn't be a surprise that the BC-250 can't really handle it all that well. The difference in FPS between 1080p low and medium is only 10%, and while that might be right, it also suggests to me that there's something of a CPU bottleneck. Both are a fairly playable 50 plus average, but the frame times are pretty spiky, and the hitching can be severe at times. Resident Evil Requiem was one of a few games that hit me with glitches. I don't know the cause of this pixelation, almost like Grace's hair is being partially censored, but the solution is to downgrade the hair settings by turning off strands. This also gives a small performance boost, so at native 1080p normal, the test scene averages 60 FPS, and again, 1% lows are pretty unimpressive. Turning on FSR quality at 1080p has a pretty nasty effect on reflection quality, and all you get in return is a 10% increase in averages, indicating another probable CPU bottleneck. But, on the other hand, frame time performance is much improved, so for playability this might be the best option. Another glitchy mess was Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which suffers from these random polygons during the intro scene that kinda look like anime speed lines. At 1080p low, the game manages 69 FPS, but aside from that, I'd call this pretty much unplayable. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is notable for being quite lightweight as far as modern games go, and this is one of the few games that came close to 60 FPS at 1080p high settings, with a fairly normal looking frametime graph to boot. Dropping to medium might be wise, however, as I'm sure there's going to be more taxing scenes than the one I'm testing later in the game. Ghost of Tsushima is also relatively light for a recent release, but it's also a port of a previous generation PS4 title, so it's not going to be as demanding as your RE9s and your Spider-Man 2s. It also manages almost 60 FPS at 1080 high, and passes 60 by switching FSR AA to TAA. This kinda suggests to me that older games are going to be the BC-250's bread and butter, and perhaps I'm being unreasonable by asking for decent performance in newer titles. One minor problem, which to be fair I have encountered before when trying this game on Linux, going into the menu often crashes the game. I think there's some kind of bug affecting Elden Ring on this PC. It should have a 60 FPS cap, and therefore if you have enough power to deliver more than 60, you'd expect the hardware to throttle back a bit. The BC-250 throttles back, with the core clock severely reduced compared to the other games and the fan barely ramping up at all, but performance is only in the 40s. It's not some kind of unusual FPS cap either. If I point at the sky, I can get near 60, so this is just another case of weird behaviour from this PC. Finally, Arc Raiders is being pretty heavy on the CPU, so I'm pretty sure the overclock is helping out here. However, the results still aren't enough to justify the sheer noise coming out of this fan. The average at 1080p medium is just a frame or two short of 60. I wanted to try a couple more games on the BC-250, but there were some bugs that just couldn't be overcome. As well as the aforementioned problems in RE Requiem, Indie, Spidey, and Doom the Dark Ages, CS2 crashed literally every time I tried to enter the settings menu, and every time I tried to hit play. And it's a hard crash, as in, even the power button doesn't turn the PC off. I had to shut it down at the power supply. With these issues in mind, as well as the general inconsistent performance in newer games, I'd stop short of giving the BC-250 an unreserved recommendation. It's most certainly not a PS5 equivalent, nor is it likely to be a Steam Machine alternative, though that does raise an interesting point. At this point in time, the Linux gaming experience is driven primarily by gaming handhelds, so it's possible that Valve's upcoming desktop PC will bring with it some optimizations that'll benefit the BC-250, and some extra polish might make this into a truly viable gaming platform. And probably stick another 100 on the asking price. Thanks again to UGREEN for sponsoring the video. Check out the Maxidok series at the link below. Thanks for watching, kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.